The internet is littered with ridiculous woodworking hacks, and as your faithful provider of no BS info, I feel an obligation to help you separate the good tips from the absolute nonsense. And quite honestly, some of these appear to be not only dumb, but also incredibly unsafe. Let's find out. This is a hack from Yasuhiro TV. Apparently he's so good that he has his own network television channel named after him. But let me show you why this actually piqued my interest, because I'm typically a speed square guy for this kind of a cut. But that right there, it's brilliant, or it looks brilliant in his video. Let's make one and see if it actually works. This appears pretty basic. I'm using 2 scraps of plywood. I do think the longer you can make the top of the T, the better, because it can brace against your workpiece. I'm using the brad nails to act as a clamp while I drive in the screws. And yes, the irony is not lost on me that I'm using a speed square to make sure it's 90 degrees. I do like that he drilled in the holes to give you something to hold on to and keep the jig steady. And as fate would have it, I left a properly sized Forstner bit in my drill press 2 months ago when I was too lazy to remove it after use. I can't be the only one that does that, right? Well, that is a super simple jig to make. Did not take me long at all. Let's establish the guide cut and then we can mess around with this for a bit. Well, that didn't take me long to develop some initial thoughts. I don't need to make any more cuts at this point. This jig definitely solves a couple problems. Number one, it gives you more room to register the base plate against a straight edge. With the smaller size speed squares, you're limited to 2x4s. For instance, this piece of MDF is too wide to get an accurate square cut. Number two, and most importantly, this zero clearance guide makes it much easier and more accurate to line up the blade to your pencil mark. And normally with a speed square, you do your best to align the blade with said pencil mark and then pull the speed square over. It's good, but not great, unlike this new jig. Now, this is probably not something that you would carry around the job site for fear of group hazing, but in the workshop, I think it's lovely. Before we start handing Yasuhiro TV the Emmy for Best Daytime Programming, I do have one minor gripe, because next he shows us how to make another simple jig for repeatable sizes. And there is nothing wrong with this. However, unless you're making a lot of longer cuts, it feels like this part of the hack is hacking something that has already been solved, which is the main problem I have with most online videos. I present the humble combination square, easily adjustable to any desired length, and there is no assembly required. I think it's fair to assume most woodworkers have one of these laying around. And you got to admit, cutting 3 tiny pieces to identical sizes with a circular saw is pretty impressive. So let's award the actual jig a no BS seal of approval. The thumb holes are a touch of class. As for the repeatable length add-on, an official score of mostly BS, which I don't think has a numerical conversion. Someone can find that out for me. But let's head to the next one. I'm seriously anxious to give this one a try. I came across a video by Danny Lipford and he blew my mind. I'm a person that always makes an absolute mess when I'm pouring finish or paint out of cans. Then when I hammer the lid back on, it splatters everywhere. But this appears absolutely terrific if it actually works. It took me a solid 5 minutes to find a can that wasn't completely ruined, but I think we have a good contender here with this Minwax. Old Danny boy used 2 pieces of tape. I'm gonna put one across like that. Then we'll put a similar sized piece across like this. I think that looks good. He also made a very sophisticated looking V-shaped fold under here to act as a spout, like a little teapot. Time for the moment of truth. Let's see what happens when we peel this away. Oh, Danny, why have you been holding out on us? Oh, look at that! Now, in Danny's defense, I'm sure this has been around for years and years, but why am I just seeing this? Of all the nonsense I was taught in school over the years that had no impact on my life whatsoever, this should have been mandatory just to graduate middle school. I'm awarding this 100% no BS, clean rims all around. On to the next. If you're someone that likes plugging holes, then you need to pay attention to this hack. And I hate to give any one person credit because I've seen dozens of videos. So let's take this as an opportunity to marvel at the cinematic spectacle that is an old Izzy Swan video. The idea is to build a simple jig and use a chisel or a plane blade to turn scrap wood into a custom-sized dowel. I have a feeling this is a prime example of something that looks very simple on a YouTube video, but is actually quite finicky. I'm starting with this scrap piece of wood, and the idea is to drill a 1/2-inch hole all the way through. Now, this is just what I had laying around. It's 1.5 inches thick. Is that the right dimension or not? I have no clue. We'll find out shortly. After that's done, you typically use a big countersink bit to chamfer the front of this hole, which makes it easier for the dowel to get started. I don't have anything that size, so I'm improvising and doing the patented drill bit shimmy to widen the top. Might be a mistake, we shall see. A nice little trick though is to start with the drill bit in reverse so it doesn't bind up. Now I'm cutting the block, which will expose enough of the hole for the blade to make contact with the soon-to-be dowel. Not an expert, but this seems like a cut that's worth sneaking up on instead of taking too much off. I did enough research to know that a sharp blade is mandatory. Again, either a chisel or a plain blade works. This one was just sharpened yesterday, and it is, whoo! Yeah, that's more than good enough. My understanding is you want the tip of the blade protruding just barely beyond the front of your jig, and the other side perfectly down the center line of the hole, and then you clamp it all in place. I made this simple crosscut jig for my circular saw recently. I have to say, I'm absolutely loving it. And there's a link to free plans below if you want to make one for yourself. Also, I tapered both ends of this. I figured if I taper the front end, it's going to be easier for it to get started in there. But the only thing left to do is do it, I guess. I think it's working. Oh, that's not good. Oh, God. We're making a dowel, but we're also starting a fire. All right, we're going to stop. Yeah, I have no clue what's happening. Before I burn the shop down, I'm going to regroup and do some troubleshooting. Check back soon. I spared you watching me take a shockingly embarrassing amount of time tinkering with this, but here's what I did and learned. No change in the 1/2-inch drill bit all the way through, but instead of using the patented drill wiggle method, I found a 5/8 of an inch Forstner bit to make the start of the hole wider, then chamfered the inside of that starter hole. My square blanks were a little too big, so I made smaller ones out of the same cherry and also poplar, thinking maybe cherry was the problem. I positioned the blade in the right spot and was finally making actual shavings, turning this into a true comeback story we all love, right? Wrong. These look like knockoff Harry Potter wands. Expectoramus. So does this all mean that this hack is 100% BS? Clearly not, and there is a mountain of evidence online by people way more talented than I am demonstrating that it is possible. But as I suspected, the learning curve seems quite steep, and honestly, the entire premise of a hack is to make something easier, not harder. And speaking of easier, you can buy one of these dowel making plates on Amazon for 35 bucks or so, and it won't take long for you to recoup the costs. Plus, they work swimmingly. Or do what I do 95% of the time, just buy the dowels. I'm not entirely sure how to give an official score to this hack, so I'm going to let you all be the judge, and you can vote down in the comments. I'll be perfectly honest, when I saw this hack from a TikTok account named Tips and Tricks, red flags started going off everywhere. Number one, because it's a TikTok account, but also I thought it was quite literally the dumbest hack I had ever seen. But after watching it 15 times or so, like the dopamine addicted death scroller that I am, I want to believe that this is true, even though I know there's no chance it works, but let's see what happens. I have my two pieces of wood that I'm going to join together, a screw, and I think I just center this and then hammer it in. Now I just drill some pilot holes for the screw. The problem is though, if you have these at all misaligned when I was hammering them together, then they're going to be misaligned when the screw goes in. That seems like a major plot hole. They just popped that screw off with a plier. That seems very unreasonable. I'm going to clip it with some bolt cutters. A little bit of glue and we are one step closer to inevitable failure. Wait, why am I even putting glue on this? I was just thinking I have my high school 20-year reunion coming up in a couple weeks. This will be a good, what do you do for fun or for a living? I put 2x4s together with screws that don't at all line up. See, this is the problem. I didn't have the 2x4s perfectly flush on the sides when I was eyeballing it, and now it's off center. There's no practical application for this though, because it's not going to allow you to apply a lot of clamping force, and you need clamping force for the glue. I want this to be something, again, because of my dopamine addiction, but yeah, this is the dumbest thing I've seen. Just, oh my God, a waste of time. This is undoubtedly a hack that will stir up a lot of buzz in the comment section. What if you don't have a lathe, but you're yearning for a vessel to consume some soup in, aka a bowl? Well, according to this cool video from Fish Over Chicks, they can make that dream a reality using only a table saw. And dear Lord, this makes me very nervous. I mean, everything about this video would appear sketchy to the average woodworker. And parts of the video definitely are, which is why I'll be deviating in some instances. However, there are operations that look like a recipe for cutting off a hand, but I think it can be done safely if you follow some basic rules. Let's find out. I've seen a lot of videos online of people who claim to make bowls by simply hollowing out the inside of a square chunk of wood like this one. In my opinion, it's kind of false advertising. Bowls need to be round, which is why I love how the Fish Over Chicks video started by circle cutting the outside. However, I'm not quite sure I have the cojones to copy how they did it. Despite having this video from a couple years ago seared into my brain, as of yesterday I had talked myself into doing this cut exactly like they did in the name of science and YouTube views. However, after a brief consult with Izzy, who I consider a table saw whiz, he strongly advised against it. I think he said, "John, do not do that," for a couple reasons. Number one, my circle is on the small side, and number two, it would be a deep cut, so the entire blade would be buried in the wood. The safest way, safe being relative, to cut circles on a table saw is to do it on a much larger diameter circle with thinner wood, and the blade cranked all the way up so it's pulling the wood down to the bed of the saw. But in my situation, where I have none of those things going for me, if something did go wrong or it caught some odd grain, it could get ugly in the blink of an eye. Thankfully, I have a saw stop, but I do feel like I have an obligation to not be totally reckless on this channel. Again, no shade at others, just a personal choice. So, as you can see, I'm doing this the old school way with a circle cutting jig and my router. And then off camera, once that was done, I chopped off the sides with a jigsaw, and later on, I'll flush trim the rest to get it all bowl-like. Now we need a way to spin this over the table saw blade. And in their video, they cut out a circle to act as a guide from a piece of plywood using a router. Which brings me to a gripe / self-reflection moment, because I'm guilty of this too. We often promise you ways of making something with only these limited tools, but then we sneak something in to speed up the task. Or in the case of this build, a router is very mandatory to safely cut this interior circle. Consider this my formal apology and pledge to no longer do that, even though I will likely break it in the next video. Also, I made this just barely wider than the bowl radius so it would spin easily. If you accidentally cut your circle too big and there's a little too much play, let me show you a hack within a hack to remedy that. Number one, you're going to want to have a really good cry. Number two, get some more plywood. And number three, cut a slightly smaller circle. I decided to swap out my 10-inch table saw blade for a single 8-inch dado blade. The idea being the smaller blade will allow me to cut deeper without going too wide, if that makes sense. From watching videos, it looks like you want the center of the circle in line with the center of the blade and spaced evenly on both sides. So I'm using the fence to help me out and some double-sided tape to secure it down. Time for the star of the show and the inevitable triggering of the safety police. The idea here is to spin the bowl blank over the table saw blade, and after each rotation, you raise the table saw blade a tiny bit and then repeat the process. Every time I turn this wheel a half spin, the blade raises by a little less than a 1/16 of an inch or so. And maybe you could raise it more, but I like to err on the side of caution. Earlier, before I put the circle holder on the saw bed, I double checked, even at max height, this will not cut all the way through the bowl, so we're good there. A couple other safety considerations. The riving knife is out. You always need to be applying pressure down when the table saw is on, even if you're not spinning the bowl. Otherwise, you run the risk of it being thrown back and hitting you in the face. I hope this goes without saying, but only raise the blade while the table saw is actually turned on. Oh yeah, one final note. See this eye all red and swollen, looks bruised right there. You gotta protect the eyes, people. I had to go to the doctor this morning. I didn't get hit in the face or anything. It turns out this is just cellulitis, but felt like a good opportunity to remind you. Always wear your safety glasses, people. All right, enough procrastination. Time to do it. I wish I could give you a cooler shot to see what's actually happening, but your guess is as good as mine right now. I figured I could do a couple passes and turn the saw off and then see what it looks like. Look, Ma, I'm doing it. No hands. All right, let's take a look and see what we got. Oh, there's a hole of sorts, and it appears somewhat centered, and I haven't pooped my pants yet. So it seems to be working. I gotta tell you, this is pretty cool. I think I'm going to lower the blade a smidge and then get back to it. The making a mess in my trousers is mostly a joke, and while I spin this bowl right round like a record baby, which I only recently learned is not a Billy Idol song, by the way, but I digress. I want to emphasize a point that my best safety advice is to only do things that you're comfortable with and reach out to people that you trust. This comment section will inevitably have plenty of people up in arms about how reckless this is and table saws aren't designed for this, but I talked with enough friends that I know have the right experience to feel okay about doing it. And just because you've been doing something for 40 years doesn't make you an expert. I work with plenty of knuckleheads that continue to be knuckleheads no matter how long they've been at something. All right, that's as high as the blade will go. Let's check it out. Ooh, that's pretty cool. To be honest, I was a skeptical hippo that this would actually work and look good, but so far I am pleasantly surprised. If you're wondering why I didn't flush trim earlier, I don't know, this just seemed like the right thing to do, and I find it's best to wait until after something catastrophic could go wrong before doing extra work. How's that for a lazy person justifying procrastination? A general furniture tip, chamfers on the underside and roundovers on the top sides of pieces is always a good look. If you decide to try this out for yourself, no matter what you do, there is going to be blade chatter on the inside of the bowl because you're manually spinning the piece slowly and there's some physics going on with the teeth and straight angles. But maybe that's why they invented lathes. After some sanding and finishing, we have ourselves a bowl of sorts. I say of sorts because, let's be honest, aesthetically, this isn't winning any awards, and I'm not sure how functional it is unless you're a bear that likes to eat porridge, a Viking, although it does look like a pretty good dog bowl. Regardless, what are my thoughts on this? Now, I went into the hack with very low expectations, and that was mostly because of the safety concerns. And I do still maintain that if you're going to be cutting a thicker, smaller circle like this, doing the outside circumference on something other than a table saw is your best bet. However, for the inside part of the bowl, as long as you go very slow and take light passes, it felt perfectly safe the entire time. And I think it's a very viable option for people like me who have absolutely no desire to own a lathe. Also, I was intentionally vague about a lot of the steps and measurements in this hack because if it's something that you want to try for yourself, I highly encourage you to do a lot of your own planning, reach out to others who are more experienced so that you can draw your own conclusions and not just listen to this dummy in a garage or angry YouTube commenters. So with all that being said, the hack of making a bowl with just a table saw is 100% no BS approved, right? Not so fast, because even if you cut the outside circumference with just a table saw, you still need a router to make the main jig and then a jigsaw to cut away the excess before flush trimming. So factoring in the false advertising, I'm going to award this a score of moderately low BS. Does that mean I plan on doing this again? If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said absolutely not. This is just for the video. But after giving it a try, that might have changed. Now I'm going to go inside and make a fresh batch of gruel to give this bowl a go. But give some of these hacks a try for yourself. We'll see you on the next one.